Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm joined in the studio tonight by Green Senator Rhiannon. Thanks for joining us, Lee.
Hi, Chris.
Senator, the carbon tax. There's very few issues in our current political situation can equate to the weight of the carbon tax. It's the main attack of the opposition against the government because of that broken promise. Yet it's one of the policy achievements or reforms, if you like, the government likes to trumpet as its main achievement. So the coming election looks like being a referendum on the carbon tax. If Tony Abbott wins, and wins handsomely, would you then accept he has a mandate to repeal the carbon tax?
The Greens in Parliament will continue to stand up for the policies that we're elected on, and the carbon tax is something that provides a foundation for the urgent need for greater action on the whole climate issue.
But you're an upper house party, you're a sort of a party of the balance of power, of brokering power, and government is formed in the lower house. If there is an emphatic Liberal Party coalition win in this election, surely it is the will of the people to repeal a carbon tax, and you should not stand in the way of that.
But I think you know, Chris, that when you're elected to Parliament, you're elected on the platform that you go to your election with. We were very clear at the last election. We've had a long-term position that we need action on climate change. That foundation is in place. It will actually be very hard for Mr Abbott to repeal it, and I think he knows that.
I think I'll give the Greens one bit of credit on this issue, and that is that they've been pretty consistent on it.
Yes, exactly.
Both the other major parties. But the point is that it makes a bit of a mockery of democracy, doesn't it? If you have what is effectively a referendum on a carbon tax and then you're able to block it.
Not at all. I think the person who's made a mockery of democracy is Mr Abbott himself, because he would never accept how this government's worked. There's nothing...
Well, hang on. Julia Gillard promised she would not introduce a carbon tax.
Yes, but also Mr Abbott, also on one of your programs, actually said that he would introduce a carbon tax. So that's come out so rarely, it's always surprised me.
He thought about it once, in opposition, you mean, when he was ruminating about it as a possible option.
Yes, yeah. But he said that he would do that. Now, we've had a leader of the opposition who just became obsessed with trying to destroy minority government. There's nothing wrong with minority government. You have a bit of give and take, you debate about the different issues, and I think you can come up with better solutions.
You would kind of enjoy the prospect of a double dissolution election, though, wouldn't you? You would love to be able to block the carbon tax in the Senate, force a double dissolution. You would then think the Greens might be able to pick up extra seats.
No, not at all.
There's a bit of self-interest in the double D option.
Not at all. Our commitment is to get better outcomes when legislation is put before Parliament, and to use the parliamentary process for the inquiries to represent community interests and get better decisions for environmental protection. We've worked consistently like that.
I don't think it's going to be an issue myself, actually. I think, I mean, if there's a comprehensive defeat for the Labor Party at this election, I doubt that Labor would stop the repeal of the carbon tax in the Senate. I don't think they'd want to go to a double dissolution. Does that worry you as someone who cares deeply about this issue? Do you think Labor will take that message from the electorate, not want to antagonise people even further, not want to put themselves into a double dissolution situation, and will actually just sit back and allow the repeal of the carbon tax?
Look, if we wound back the achievements that have been made for real action on climate change, it would obviously be disturbing. But it's not that easy to do. There's a whole number of contracts set in place. It's been set up in a very detailed way with far-reaching legislation requirements. And I think that Mr Abbott would be looking at that very closely, and he'll go forward with a lot of bluster that we know that doesn't mean he will follow through.
While we're on climate change, the Climate Commission, should that be out there actually debating and discussing the various theories on climate change, the evidence that's coming in, what's happening globally, rather than just popping out pamphlets that telling us about an angry summer and that Australia's already in the grip of climate change? And we know the UK Met Office, for instance, which is a world-renowned authority on climate change, is quite openly talking about the pause in global average temperatures. Now, of course, they still say the planet is warming on trend, but they recognise that even though there's been massive increases in carbon emissions over the past 10 to 15 years, global average temperatures have not been rising.
But the Climate Commission is doing essential work, and I'm aware that there's deniers.
What's their essential work, apart from telling us all to get very, very worried about climate change?
Well, I don't think they're telling us to get worried. They're just putting the facts out there. Like, you won't find a scientific body in Australia that denies that there isn't issues to do with climate change that need to be addressed. And this is where we need to wind back the subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. Extreme weather is very real. We have an inquiry in Parliament because Senator Christine Milne was successful in moving that and gaining the support of Parliament to get it in place. We need to look at it.
Is it putting the facts out there to call the summer the angry summer?
Well,
and to talk about extreme weather?
I think if you spoke to a number
Are they factual?
Well, I think if you spoke to a number of the people who have been hit by the terrible bushfires, the heat, so many more people die when we have those long periods of incredibly hot days, they'd say it was pretty angry.
Yeah, I think our summers are always pretty angry. It depends, it depends whether you just pick one out and say that. Look,
there's a consistency there, though.
I just want to ask you about the opposition's position paper that they've talked about publicly now about developing the north of Australia. It includes plans to investigate a lot of dam proposals, irrigation, turning the north into a food bowl for Asia effectively. What's your view of those intentions?
Oh, we have a number of concerns the way the opposition rolled it out, and you need to remember when it was first announced, Mr Abbott was outed that he might even be taking money off the aid budget to try and pay for this, something that's simply unacceptable. And what we also need to look at is the purchase by foreign companies of our land. The issue of food security needs to be a top priority in the 21st century, and a lot of these measures will be just quite detrimental. More dams is not the way to go. Dry farming has got a huge future, and Australia can lead the world in that.
What do you think about Wayne Swan's announcement just 2 days ago to put up $2.5 million for a feasibility study for a dam on the Burdekin River up near Townsville to look at a multi-billion-dollar irrigation project there?
Oh, look, I think that's got more to do with the election than anything else. I mean, so many...
Well, it's in Bob Katter's seat. We're about to speak to Bob
Yeah.
Katter. Do you think he's trying to buy favour with a crucial independent?
Oh, well, I think that will be interesting to hear what how Mr Katter responds to it. But these big infrastructure projects are so often flagged coming into an election, and that's some areas where Labor's watching closely. We know they have problems in Queensland.
But do you support this dam project, the Burdekin Dam project, Hell's Gate Dam, and do you support the feasibility study to have a look at that?
Oh, look, so much of that is wasted money, that these big dam projects are often just a shot in the dark. They're rarely delivered, and if they are, there can be a lot of problems with them.
When you look at the way this country developed post-war, though, is a lot of our development, places like Mildura, Renmark, Griffith in New South Wales, I mean, there's been dams and irrigation practices fed by immigrant workers. It's been absolutely crucial in creating the food bowl that is agricultural Australia.
Oh, look, we're not denying that. Like, there is a huge contribution, but it's the level of irrigation, it's the type of farming that's undertaken with water that we need to balance that out. But we do need to look at some big infrastructure projects, and this is where we need the government to be serious about high-speed rail along the east coast of Australia, some big renewable projects. This is where the government should be looking how it can support those projects. That's where we can generate jobs long into the future.
I'm wondering whether immigration might be a political area of debate in the lead up to the election. It was a bit last time. We had both major parties talking about downscaling immigration. Are the Greens, you'd like to see our immigration numbers reduced, wouldn't you?
Well, we have support for the expansion of the humanitarian programs.
What about 457 visas and economic migrants?
Well, we have a lot of concern the way the Prime Minister handled that 457 debate when she was in Western Sydney. Like, it certainly looked very calculated, where she was making statements that really did engender greater fear and insecurity.
So you support high numbers of 457 immigrants?
Well, we need to certainly look at jobs for Australian workers. We obviously recognise that. But there is a need for 457s at times. They are linked to Australian conditions and Australian wages. What we should have from the government is ensuring that those conditions that Australian workers have won are enforced and those workers can join unions.
Sure, but what I'm trying to get a handle on is whether the Greens support high levels of immigration to Australia.
Well, our immigration actually isn't huge, but at times there is a need for it to be increased. We haven't put a number on it because it's something that is flexible depending on the conditions overseas. But we have certainly supported our immigration program. Sometime both of us obviously had forebears who came here to this country. You know, it's been essential for the country.
Now, the Prime Minister's in China at the moment. She met with Xi Jinping earlier this evening. Do you welcome a drive for more Chinese investment in Australia?
Well, we need to look at what type of investment it is. When I was in State Parliament, I did a lot of exposing the role of China Shenhua, the world's biggest coal company, in terms of buying up land in Liverpool Plains. There's a lot of worries about those types of companies operating here.
But in principle, Chinese investment is a good thing for Australia?
Well, it certainly can be expanded, but I think what would be advisable for the Prime Minister is talking to the Chinese about high-speed rail. They have a high-speed rail in their country, about renewable energy projects. They're starting to lead the world.
What about agriculture and producing food to feed Asia?
Well, I think there's opportunities there, but we do have concerns about Chinese companies buying up Australian land.
All right, thanks very much for your time tonight, Senator.
Thank you, Chris.
Senator Rhiannon. We'll be back